This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. I'm starting a petition to get a recovery day after each holiday because, coffee can only do so much. Here's what we got for y'all. Tonight, a closer look at the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies and new efforts to make these virtual currencies a bit more eco-friendly. Plus, we asked the Pentagon about an upcoming report on UFOs and would you believe they don't really want to talk about it. Nevertheless, we explored what that report could include and what it all means. But first, here's what you need to know right now. In another Trump-era reversal, the Biden administration suspended all drilling leases in Alaska's Arctic Wildlife National Refuge Tuesday, pending a new environmental review. After a more than 40-year battle, the Arctic Refuge's coastal plain was opened to oil and gas development as a part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The Trump administration held the first ever lease sale in the refuge on January 6th of this year. The leases were issued on January 19th. The very next day, on January 20th, President Biden signed a temporary moratorium on any oil and gas related activities there, so the suspension doesn't come as a huge surprise. The new review that was ordered could impose additional restrictions and possibly even cancel the current leases. The president traveled to Oklahoma today to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. A century later, it's still remembered as one of the worst attacks of racial violence in U.S. history. As many as 300 people were killed when a white supremacist mob raided and bombed more than 35 square blocks of an all-black district in the city. It left more than 10,000 people homeless. For a long time, the massacre was largely ignored by US presidents. Biden is actually the first president to ever schedule a visit to honor those killed on Black Wall Street.
We know here, in this hallowed place, we simply can't bury pain and trauma forever. And at some point, there'll be a reckoning, an inflection point, like we're facing right now as a nation.
Ahead of the trip, the White House announced new policies aimed at closing the wealth gap between Black and white Americans, including a new interagency effort to fight housing discrimination, along with new efforts to increase federal contracting with small minority-owned businesses. You might start hearing public health experts mentioning the Greek alphabet a lot. Don't worry, they didn't start their own fraternity or anything. It's actually how the World Health Organization wants to refer to COVID-19 variants going forward. The move is to make these virus variants a bit easier to remember than B.1.1.7, but it's also an effort to uncouple the stigma around the variant itself from the nation where it was first detected. We've seen that sort of thing happen firsthand with COVID-19. Earlier in this pandemic, many folks, including in the previous administration, called it the China virus. Since the outbreak of the pandemic, there's been a sharp rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. Something similar also happened back in 1918. The so-called Spanish flu didn't actually originate in Spain. The first case was actually detected in Kansas. Spain was just one of the hardest hit countries, and now more than 100 years later, the nation is still associated with that pandemic. The scientific names for the COVID-19 strains won't be going away, but here's how you might hear about them going forward. The current variants of concern got the first 4 letters of the alphabet. Alpha is for the variant which first emerged in the UK. Beta went to the one first detected in South Africa. Gamma is the name for the one that arose in Brazil. And Delta was given to the variant in India. There are also 6 other variants of interest that'll be identified using the next 6 letters of the alphabet. China's government is allowing couples to have up to 3 children rather than just 2 per family. The change comes just 3 weeks after Beijing published the country's 2020 census, which showed the country's population climbing at its slowest rate in decades. That, combined with China's aging population, is causing fears that the nation won't have enough workers to support older citizens. Back in the 1970s and 80s, the one-child policy was first implemented by the Chinese government to slow the population growth. It worked, but it came with a lot of unintended consequences. For one, the country's overall sex ratio was skewed towards men. Female babies were seen as less desirable, and many baby girls were abandoned or put into orphanages. There was also a rise of what's known as invisible children. When families had more than one kid, they were forced to keep the other a secret, meaning they were undocumented. In 2016, the 2-child policy was announced, but the change didn't lead to the increase in population the country hoped for. It's still unclear when the new 3-child policy will be implemented. High education costs and little support for maternity leave have contributed to a reluctance to have kids. In the announcement, the government said it plans to help with those problems, but it didn't give many details on how. Cryptocurrency has been gaining in popularity over the last few years, and we're starting to see a growing acceptance from financial institutions. At the same time, folks have been ringing the alarm on the negative environmental impact of crypto because of the energy needed to keep the market moving. Newsy's Tyler Atkinson tells us about a new verification model that could remove the need for the energy-intensive machines used for cryptocurrencies.
It's no secret that cryptocurrencies are notoriously bad for the climate. Right now, Bitcoin uses as much energy as Pakistan and has a carbon footprint comparable to Libya. Ethereum, another popular cryptocurrency, uses the same amount of electricity as Singapore. But there is a solution on the horizon. Experts think that a switch from the proof-of-work system to a proof-of-stake system could drastically reduce cryptocurrency energy usage. Let's explain what that means. Currently, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum operate on a proof-of-work system, which uses power-hungry specialized computers to verify transactions for people sending cryptocurrencies on a ledger known as a blockchain. These computers work to guess a 64-digit code that, once discovered, opens up a block on the chain to verify transactions, with the winning operator getting a reward for solving the puzzle. As more blocks are unlocked, the puzzles get harder and require more energy. These machines are energy-intensive by design and serve as a security feature for blockchain networks to keep away cyber criminals.
If you want to attack the network, you have to make more useless computations than the ones that are currently making useless computations. So how are you going to make that sustainable? Like, by design, it's not meant to be sustainable. It's meant to waste resources.
But in a proof-of-stake system, those who validate transactions are picked based on how many coins miners hold rather than computational power. The more coins owned by a miner, the more power they have to verify transactions.
It fundamentally is a silver bullet for emissions. You're going from a blockchain that's secured by robust electricity usage to a blockchain that's secured by a different economic imperative of staking your coins.
So if we go and we find people that have a certain amount of the currency, and we use those people as a way to socially mechanism to fact check whether or not something that's being put onto the block is correct or not, it dramatically reduces the amount of energy consumption.
Proof of stake effectively eliminates the incentive to use a lot of energy-intensive specialized machines to participate in the market.
The energy consumption is going to go down by a factor 99.99%, something in that range.
Some of the most well-known cryptocurrencies are making the shift to proof of stake, and soon. Ethereum, the second most expensive cryptocurrency on the market, said it would complete the transition in the coming months. What remains to be seen is whether Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency, will eventually make that switch to proof of stake, or if it will try to find other ways to make its operation greener.
I believe that if there's a way where the end buyers or the large companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet or ETFs are able to know that they have greener or fully green plus offset Bitcoin, that there will be a demand for that.
Tyler Atkinson, Newsy, Chicago.
When you're back, we'll hear from the cast of In the Heights ahead of its release later this month. Finally. In the Heights, a movie musical from Lin-Manuel Miranda, is getting a hybrid release this month in theaters and streaming after a year-long delay. The film is about Manhattan's Washington Heights neighborhood and touches on themes of race, family, poverty, and immigration. Set to music, of course. Newsy's Casey Mendoza spoke to some of the actors about the film's themes and the future of Latinx representation in Hollywood.
En un barrio called Washington Heights, the streets were made of music.
In the Heights is the musical of the summer. Telling the story of the New York City neighborhood of Washington Heights, the film is a celebration of community, family, and Latin American culture.
Although we're specifically talking about Washington Heights, community and home are both extremely universal themes.
And that translates no matter what your background is, you'll be able to connect to that music. But also to see Latinos, Latinx, the community, to see us like everyone else.
It's time to make some noise.
Directed by John M. Chu of Crazy Rich Asians fame and written by Lin-Manuel Miranda and Chiara Alegria Jures, In the Heights premieres more than a decade after its Tony Award-winning Broadway debut. The movie stays true to its source and its push to uplift real Latin American communities.
It tells these specific, real, relatable stories and does not hang on the trauma of it.
We have so many stories on the ends of the spectrum. It's either like completely ignoring that there's any struggle, or it's like we're criminals.
In the Heights explores the underrepresented Latinx stories of first-generation college students, business owners battling gentrification, and neighborhood matriarchs who raised the children of the community as if they were their own.
You get to see the breadth of the experiences in all of our characters.
The dad that I play is my uncles, my tios.
You know, to be able to withdraw inspiration from my aunt, mi tia Chabela, that has a salon, or the mothers or the cousins.
These women who are like these backbones of our communities, of our families.
Not only were we like willing to do that, but we were proud to do that.
This is going to be an emotional roller coaster. The odds are against you.
The In the Heights cast hopes that the film can inspire more stories from Latin American communities around the country.
This story, I hope, is the beginning of many, many Latino stories.
In the Heights premieres Friday, June 11th in theaters and on HBO Max. Casey Mendoza, Newsy, Chicago.
Here on ITL, we are fans of being resourceful and sneaking our own snacks into the theater. So, for the folks seeing In the Heights in the theaters, I'm officially declaring piragua as the item we're sneaking in. Just eat it quickly. You don't want a flavored mess on your hands. Today marks the start of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, and this year, the NOAA is predicting an above-average season. If you remember, last year had a record-breaking 30 named storms, so many that the NOAA had to start calling them by letters of the Greek alphabet. National reporter Maya Rodriguez takes a look into whether above-average hurricane seasons and other forms of severe weather are becoming more common.
Like clockwork, every year, for half the year, hurricanes become a part of life in the Atlantic Basin. Already this year, Tropical Storm Ana formed in May, marking the 7th year in a row the season produced a named storm before the official start of hurricane season. So, is it time to extend the season?
We're still trying to figure out if it is a trend and what could be behind it.
Falco Jute is a research meteorologist with the National Center for Atmospheric Research. He says there may be several reasons behind the increase in named May storms.
One reason is that our technology has gotten better, so we're detecting more systems. Another reason is that we've gotten a little bit more lenient in naming storms. And the third reason is there actually is a trend that could be related to climate change.
The major factor is the warming of our planet, and in this case, particularly the warming of the ocean.
Susan Lozier is an oceanographer and president of the American Geophysical Union, a nonprofit that studies earth sciences. She says a warming planet isn't just impacting hurricane season in the east, but also wildfire season in the west.
We've had extreme events, way before we had, global warming, but it's just the frequency of them. But also changes in precipitation patterns that bring extended droughts. Those events, those extreme events, impact the fire season or the frequency of fires.
Already this year, a severe drought is gripping the West, prompting fears of a potential record-breaking and earlier fire season. Back east, the question of whether hurricane season needs to start earlier remains.
It's really for us humans to be ready. And so we extend that window, it kind of dilutes the process.
Really, I think the more important message is for people to, at the coastlines to always be prepared.
Ready for anything Mother Nature might bring. I'm Maya Rodriguez.
At some point this month, the Department of Defense and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence will deliver to Congress an unclassified report on UFOs. This follows years of disclosures and military videos of things that we just can't explain. But former military personnel and researchers say information is being held back. Newsy's Sasha Ingber tells us more about why some folks are awaiting this report with a little bit of cynicism.
Sean Cahill was aboard the USS Princeton in 2004 when he saw a now famous sight.
I saw 5 to 7 lights in the sky that moved toward a center area and all blinked out very quickly in a very exotic manner.
These white oblong aircrafts, later nicknamed Tic Tacs, had no sign of propulsion, no wings, and no heat.
The Tic Tacs were coming in at roughly suborbital at around 80,000 feet and then dropping directly down to the water in an instant.
Later that day, service members joked about aliens and were told to get back to work. It's a pattern Cahill and others say has continued at the Defense Department, that the government has been covering up whatever it knows about UFOs, spreading false information, and stymieing requests for documents under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. But a government report on UFOs that senators asked for last year is due in June, and many are eagerly, albeit cynically, waiting for a public version.
When you deal with the UFO topic, it seems like the government goes out of their way to not give you the truth, or at least the full truth.
That's FOIA expert John Greenwald, head of an online repository possessing thousands of declassified documents. Though the Pentagon has admitted it can identify certain aerial objects, it often denies Greenwald's requests, citing an exemption for national defense.
Although we don't have the exact reason why, we know for a fact whatever it is, it's a threat to national security if they release the truth.
Leaked Navy images have cropped up in recent weeks. Observers speculate that what service members have been seeing more and more in the sky
going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Is either extraterrestrial, ultra-secret U.S. technology, or our adversaries cleverly using the stigma of reporting UFOs and looking crazy to conduct surveillance. Pentagon records show the U.S. government has investigated what it calls unidentified aerial phenomena for decades, even after ending a 22-year effort called Project Blue Book in 1969. That program concluded nothing pointed toward alien vehicles or exceeded their scientific knowledge. But today is a different story.
The technology would be similar if you took an F-18 and flew it in front of the most advanced scientists in the 16th century and asked them to explain to you how that F-18 worked.
Robert Powell is a member of an organization that analyzes sightings all over the world.
We've asked the government to basically release as much information as they can so the scientific community can examine the data and draw conclusions. Right now, scientists can't do that because the government keeps all the data.
The Pentagon declined to comment for this story. Meanwhile, the Defense Department's Inspector General is conducting an evaluation into the department's actions on UFOs. From Washington, Sasha Ingber, Newsy.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag NewsyInTheLoop. It's probably the best way to get in touch with us and share your theories about what's in the upcoming government report. I'm skeptical, but I too want to believe. As we mentioned earlier in the show, it's been 100 years since the Tulsa Massacre, where a white mob killed black residents and destroyed homes and businesses in the city's Greenwood district. The attack erased generational black wealth and terrorized survivors into staying silent. But one of the only living survivors is telling his story of the aftermath and how, at 100 years old, he's still fighting for justice. Newsy's Therese Garnier has more.
We lost so much. We just lost so much. I believe if all this hadn't happened when I was a child, things would have been better in life.
This is Hugh Van Ellis. He and his attorney, Demario Solomon Simmons, sat down with Newsy to share his story of perseverance and hope following the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. He and his sister Viola Fletcher are among the only living survivors of one of the most brutal attacks against blacks on U.S. soil. He was barely one when white mobs began burning homes and businesses around Greenwood, an area in Tulsa famously known as Black Wall Street.
I remember what my sister Viola told me. She said they would start guns going off, and Dad looked outside to see people getting shot, houses getting burnt. So there's only 6 little kids aboard, I was a baby. So my father, we just managed to barely get out of just put our clothes on our back when they have time to put, gather nothing else together.
They escaped with their lives, but Ellis says life was tough for him and his siblings after losing everything. He says they had to pick cotton to survive, even mentioning he didn't receive his high school diploma until he was in his 20s, after being drafted into a segregated military.
Back then they had a black army and they had a white army. And you see a little different than the white army. Sometimes you couldn't get supplies you needed in the black army, sometimes you couldn't. Sometimes they weren't able to get you shoes or stuff like that,
Just married and expecting a baby, Ellis's unit traveled to India and Saipan, where he says they fought alongside the British Army.
Wow. And how did that make you feel, knowing that you survived an attack on your family?
That made me feel like am I going to make it? I'm going to service. Back in the end, there was a lot of war going on. I'm going to service. I just survived the drought. Now I'm going to service. I'm going to take another shot at my life.
But Van Ellis says he proudly served his country for 2.5 years, even though he faced discrimination.
In the service, you had a white fountain drink out and a black fountain. Then you had a restroom. They had one stool for black guys and one stool for five or six stools for the other side of people. That's racist.
What did that make you feel? I mean, just seeing that.
It make you feel bad. This make you feel so bad, but you're in the service and you have to do your duty, so you have to live with it.
Now he's in a battle of a different sort, fighting for reparations.
We were left with nothing.
The 100-year-old traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress, shedding light on how the Tulsa Massacre not only impacted him and his family, but an entire community.
All the years, I thought back about 100 years. I'm 6 months old during this time. And the same thing goes on, like, you're looking for justice. You're looking for something to get better. And I was glad I had the opportunity to go up there and do that. Because some guys in the state, your congressman in the state, they won't do nothing for you.
Therese Garnier, Newsy, Tulsa.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more On the Loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.